Welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beard. Harold Sheldon from the Big Ten Network, kind enough to join me again. And Harold, we're getting into week 10 of the Big Ten. We got some marquee game. We got really a big marquee game. I think we have a game where you're going to see a team finally step up in weight class. And then you also have Oregon to see what Oregon does when they go to the big house for the first time. But I haven't had you on since the Michigan State game. So let me just ask you, let's rehash a little bit before we move forward. What did you think of that game?
I thought it was another golden opportunity that Michigan State let get away. It felt in some ways similar to the Boston College game, where it seems like they were in control for parts of it, couldn't finish in the red zone, untimely turnover, and just couldn't stop the running quarterback when needed. And it seemed like everything was right there for them. I love the game plan early of trying to take the crowd out of it. Long sustained drives, mixing in quarterback run with the actual run game. But as we've seen all year, they've had trouble finishing drives. You get the penalty that takes you out of 4th and goal from the 2. You back it up to the 7. You miss the field goal. And then that was kind of a sign of things to come, even though they scored on the next drive, leaving those 7 points out on the field when you lose by 7. I mean, that was pretty much the game.
Yeah, I mean, that first drive, you did everything right, but score. This is like, I don't even want to go back to that place, but okay, we're here for a second. Call a timeout.
Yeah.
Don't get a leg game penalty.
Yep.
What frustrates me more about this lingering offense is they're allergic to the red zone. They're absolutely horrible. I mean, I call it the empty calorie offense because you put up these stats, but you're kicking field goals. You're not scoring touchdowns. And if you don't score on a 30-yard, 40-yard, 50-yard touchdown run or bomb, you get inside the 10-yard line, Matt, you just bring Jonathan Kim out there on first down because you're not going to get any place. You're not going to do anything. The only thing you're going to do is shoot yourself in the foot and turn the ball over or turn it over on downs. Just send Kim out there. And when Kim misses the field goal, the chip shot, you just kind of like, oh, my God, is it going to be one of those types of days? You thought they rebounded. You thought that they recovered. But it was the little mistakes. It was that first scoring drive. It was, the fumble right before the half. Like, why? What was your game plan? Were you trying to score? I mean, yeah, maybe you just kind of take a knee. You go in and up at half, and then you just kind of take your chances. Now you gave Michigan 3 points. You took away 3 to 7 points, which you think about it really was the difference in the game because that final drive may have been just a drive where you can go down there to kick the walk-off field goal. And look, it ain't all the offensive side because on the defensive side, Joe Rossi, I don't understand how you don't get, and a lot of Big Ten coaches, I'll give credit to Jed Fish, Washington's coach. He got it. He understood the assignment. When number 10 comes in the game, number 10 can't pass. So when number 10 comes into the game, all my safeties move up to the line. We're going to clog this thing up. We're going to send 8 to your 5 that you have blocking. We're going to clog it up. We're going to stop the run. USC, it took them a half. Minnesota, it took them a half. Michigan State, it took them an entire game to realize Alex Orji doesn't pass the ball. And you're so afraid of that trick play that you just, like the final drive? You had to get a stop. They put him in the game for a reason. It wasn't Davis Warren because we're not passing the ball. We're not going to accidentally throw an incomplete pass and stop the clock. We're just going to run it. You got to stop us. And here's MSU with 2 deep safeties. For what? Huh? So, yeah. That horrible game, great game plan to start. Horrible, no adjustments, bad game plan to end the game. That's my opinion.
No, I'd agree with that. And, as we talked about with the whole red zone thing, if they don't score on big plays, I mean, you talk about worst red zone touchdown percentage. Houston, Virginia, Miami, Ohio. Those are the only teams worse in the country than Michigan State.
So, yeah, I mean, and Unless you got something else to add about that game, because you just getting my blood pressure up this morning.
Nah, we can move it on. We can move.
You
We
sure?
can move it
Nah,
on. Yeah,
you weren't here. Because
I'm
this was
positive.
one where, you know what, I normally, I told Evan, the producer, I like to wait 24 hours so I just don't get too emotional. But
Yeah,
I was still hot after the game because it was just wasted opportunity.
yeah,
And then you see how the thing ends and the fight that happens afterwards. And the
yeah,
Big Ten says, well, boys will be boys. Really? Because
yeah.
2 years ago, y'all was calling in prosecuting attorneys. And let me just add this. Apparently, I'm not a smart man. In the game, I think Turner gets the targeting call, right?
Mhm.
So he has to sit out. I'm going to ask you this, Harold. What is the purest definition of targeting?
So I feel like if there's any gray area, then it probably shouldn't be targeting. It's
No,
kind of
no.
like the whole catch not catch thing. Like some
Well,
things are obvious.
I say that to say, if you're going to call him Turner for targeting, when Colston Loveland headbutts Anthony Johnson, with the game was still going on. There was still
Right.
24 seconds left. He headbutted him.
Yeah.
Is that not the purest definition of targeting? You are
Yeah.
taking the crown of your helmet and
Yep.
striking another man in the head.
Yep.
I said, I don't know much. You're smart. You work at the Big Ten Network. Maybe there's a rule that says in the last 24 seconds, it's kind of like pass interference on a Hail Mary. We just don't call that play. So I'm just curious because if anything, Colton Loveland should be sitting for a half. He headbutted him. And it's not even like the Big Ten can't go back and look at it in 4K on your own network. Boom, he did that. But I digress. Um, but talking about Michigan State's inefficiencies in the red zone, you're playing up against Indiana. Now, attempting 7 field goals, making 6 works against a team like Iowa. Iowa can't score in a whorehouse. Indiana, not so much. Now, Curtis Rourke may or may not play. He had thumb surgery on his throwing hand. But Indiana is all about scoring touchdowns. If you try to match them field goal for touchdowns, you can get blown out. That's how they've been doing this. But on the flip side, I think their strength of schedule is like in the hundreds. I forgot the exact number, like 117 strength of schedule. It's bad. They played nobody. MSU's, I think, strength of schedule is 9. They played a lot of people. To me, this is a step up in weight class for Indiana. You're going up against probably a better defense. But can MSU's offense match what the Indiana defense is going to bring?
So I think it goes back to can Aiden Childs get time to throw? Indiana, for as much as we talk about their offense, their defense has been really good too. Uh, Top 10 in the country in rush defense. Now again, schedule could play a part in all of that, but top 10 in sacks, top 10 in pressure rate. Like they do a really good job of getting after the quarterback, really good job of stopping the run. But when they don't get after the quarterback, they do give up some big plays. In the last 4 games, they've given up over 200 yards in the air. So plays could be there to be made. However, as we saw last week with Indiana, D'Angelo Pons had a pick six. Will Rogers, who was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the Big Ten from Washington, threw a couple. One got taken back the other way. So if you put the ball in harm's way, it could cost you, as we've seen with Aiden Childs. He's done it once in every game against the FBS team this year. So I do think matchups will be there. We'll see if they're more aggressive trying to throw the ball because they certainly weren't last week. But I think this is a situation where they might have to do that. If they happen to run it well against them and do the ball control thing like they have the last 2 weeks, that could be a way to keep that Indiana offense off the field. We just haven't really seen teams run on Indiana yet. I know Nebraska tried and failed miserably, and that's probably been their best opponent thus far. But if they're able to control the ball for 38 minutes like they had for the last 2 games, that might be the way. But if they don't, then Childs is going to have to win the game, and I don't know if he can.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm like, where did this Michigan State running attack come from in the last 2 games? I thought maybe they saw something with Iowa, but then at one point in the Michigan game, they almost had 100 yards of offense to Michigan's 1. I mean, all of a sudden these offensive linemen, I guess they can run block, not necessarily pass block because Aiden is still kind of scrambling running for his life. Well, yeah, I look at Indiana, man. It's explosive play after explosive play. The pick six on the defense. It's like Coach Signetti just has these guys ready. Now, can they handle the step up in the weight class? Because this may be. I guess I thought Nebraska would be a real true test for them. I was shocked at just how lopsided that game became. I was wondering if they could handle the pressure of game day being there, and and they did. I mean, backup QB. I guess like are we just underestimating them because of their schedule, or is this really one of the top teams? Is Indiana a top team in the nation?
I think they're a really, really good team. And I think because it's Indiana, we're finding reasons not to say that they're a good team. Like if this was, Ohio State or Oregon that had the schedule and they were beating everybody by 15, 14, 20, 30, 40 points, we'd just be saying that, oh man, they're rolling. Like they really hadn't played anybody, but they're rolling. But because it's Indiana, it's like, well, I'm not so sure. The schedule,
Yeah.
we were just finding reasons. I do think it's interesting that this number is still hovering around 7.5, because stat wise and metric wise, everything says Indiana should be favored by more than that. So I'm wondering if they know something that I don't know. But if you look at it, like Indiana, they played 32 quarters of football. They have not lost one of them.
Right.
Like they've
That's what I'm saying.
won 27 quarters and tied five. And they've never trailed
Yeah.
in any game. Like,
Washington tried to give it their best shot. Washington, I thought for a second, I'm like, okay, they gave up the pick six. Okay, Washington, maybe. No. Ball game over. So yeah, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and like it's going to be a 3:30 kickoff at Spartan Stadium. They're coming out with the dark uniforms, so nice shadows. I don't know. I guess the helmet doesn't really show up. So
oh yeah, I do see that. That's nice.
yeah, it doesn't really show up. Hold on, let me grab it. But yeah, it's so
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. I need that one. I
Yeah, when
like
they
that
when
one.
they when they initially came out with it, I had my guy. I was like, yeah, we got to get that one going. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I look for Michigan. So this basically for Michigan State to beat them. This is the Aiden Childs game. He has to have that game where no turnovers. What would you say? 250 yards in the air, another 30 or 40 running.
Yeah, I think so. And for whatever reason, it didn't really seem like he ran as much after the second half last week, or in the second half last week. And I'm not really sure why, because it seemed like that was working pretty well, kind of mixing some design runs in with him. We know he can scramble around. We know he's elusive. And so, the fact that Indiana, is tied with Oregon for the most sacks in the Big Ten, like this is a situation where he's going to have to get out of trouble. He's going to have to freelance. He's going to have to make some plays while also protecting the ball. Because as we've seen, he'll try to do that stuff and then he's loose with it and it's getting knocked out and the other team's falling on it and it's a drive killer. So again, maybe I don't know if Childs is ready for that moment where he can just win a game by himself. And maybe we're asking too much of him, but considering, he was a top 80 recruit and all that kind of stuff. And like you see the talent, like maybe this is a game where he puts it all together. And I think he has to in order for them to win.
You spoke about Oregon. Oregon coming to the big house. I think they're about a 15-point favorite coming up to Michigan. Michigan has Jack Tuttle retire from football, leaving them with just Davis Warren and Alex Orji at the quarterback spot. What do you see happening in this game? Does Michigan have the firepower to go up against the number one team in the nation and keep this thing competitive or even pull off the upset? Because right now, because they beat Michigan State, if everything holds equal, they'll finish the year 6-6. You got to figure. Can they pull off the biggest upset in college football and knock off Oregon? The game is at home for them.
I'd be really surprised. This just seems like a really bad matchup for them.
Well, that's why it's
Uh,
called the biggest upset.
yes, agreed. I think last week worked out so well because Davis Warren didn't get any pressure. Michigan State has gone 4 games without a sack. Meanwhile, Oregon is tied with Indiana for the most sacks in the Big Ten, and they seem to be getting better and better and better. And they've done it against quality competition. Like they ran Illinois off the field. They played toe to toe with Ohio State. They beat Boise, who's now a top 20 team. So like they're clearly battle tested. I know there's the time zone thing, but I think the fact that they're playing at 3:30 and not noon certainly helps them. And Oregon right now just looks like the best team in college football. They're balanced. They got explosive plays. The offensive line has kept Dylan Gabriel clean. So if Michigan can't get home and Gabriel's got time to throw, especially against a lot of these DBs out here, we're not sure about Will Johnson, but uh, they're way more explosive than Michigan State was, and I think they're going to be able to take advantage of some of those shots downfield, as we've seen with Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart. Yeah, I'd be really, really surprised if Oregon didn't cruise in this game. But I got one for you. I got a stat for you here.
Okay.
So, as you said, Oregon's about 2 touchdown favorite, 15-point favorite. It's only the third time in the last 40 years a reigning national champion has entered the game as a double-digit home underdog. The previous two lost by 28 plus.
Wait, hold on. I got to write this down. Say that stat again, please, for the people in the back.
So this is the third time in the last 40 years that a reigning national champion is a double-digit home underdog. And the previous two, the champion lost by 28 plus points. And that's 2020 LSU, that's 2011 Auburn, both to Alabama.
20 and what?
2020 LSU and 2011 Auburn.
Wow, to Alabama. Wow. Okay. That's a nice stat. I got to use that one on the show. Yeah, I mean, I look at this game. Can Davis Warren and Alex Orji be the answer for the rest of the year, or is this clearly just a Band-Aid and Sherrone Moore has to go and find a better option in the offseason?
Yeah, I think you try to just survive with that 2 QB system for the year, but I don't think it's sustainable going forward. I think the way that Sherrone Moore did it last week, made a lot of sense where, they didn't ask Davis Warren to do too much, basically throw to your best guy in Colston Loveland when it's there. Don't force anything. Don't turn it over. All right, now we'll put Orgy in. We'll mix that in. And, we'll have some trick plays here and there, because even with all of that, they didn't reach 300 yards. And so they were able to, to take advantage of mistakes that Michigan State made. But when they're playing against better teams like Oregon, Indiana, Ohio State, I don't know if you can do the 2 QB system and get away with 260 yards and beat those teams. Like, I just don't think their defense is good enough to keep them in, like 20-17, 24-17, 24-20 games. Like, I'd be surprised if all three of those ranked teams don't at least score 30. And so if that's the case, Michigan's offense has to meet that level. And I don't know if they could do that with these 2 QBs.
Okay. Well, no, that helps me. That helps me when it comes to my picks on Friday of who I'm taking and why. Wow. I did not realize that. All right. You spoke about Ohio State. I guess probably the best game of the Big Ten this week. Ohio State, Penn State. Was it 2 versus 3? Penn State, even though the game's at home, is the underdog to Ohio State. Drew Aller, game time decision. Both coaches really struggling against, those top opponents in those top 10 games. I guess when you look at this matchup, what's going to be the difference? Is it simply the fact whether Drew Aller plays in this game, or like what's going to be that difference maker in this game?
Can Penn State actually finish in the fourth quarter? If you look at during this 7-game loser streak that Penn State has had against Ohio State, in the first 3 quarters, they've basically been even. Ohio State's outgained them or outscored them by 17 points combined in the first 3 quarters of these last 7 games. And in the fourth quarter, Ohio State's outscored them 90-51. So for whatever reason, Ohio State just makes a play or two in the fourth quarter to just open it up, and Penn State can't respond. And there's been several times where Penn State could have won this game. They had leads in 2017, 2018, 2022. And for whatever reason, they just can't finish the deal. They don't get the big play. They don't get the sack. And so Penn State has to find a way to make a big play when it counts because they've been able to do it for the first three quarters, but that fourth quarter they haven't. So whether that's Tyler Warren trying to make a play, whether that's Nicholas Singleton breaking off a big run or Abdul Carter getting a big sack, that's how it has to happen. The fourth quarter, Penn State has to find a way to win it because that's been the issue in every game they played against Ohio State during the streak. Like they've matched up well with them. Like they've recruited to play against Ohio State, but Ohio State's players have been just a little bit better, and Penn State hasn't been able to overcome that.
Speaking of Ohio State, I'm talking with Harold Sheldon here from the Big Ten Network. Harold, what's wrong with Ohio State? They just seem broken. Like when they're dialed in, they're dialed in. But when they don't care, like last week, you know, when they played Nebraska, honestly, Nebraska should have won the game. I mean, the Big Ten came out and apologized and said, oops, our bad. You actually did pick up a first down in the first half on us. They just did. Do they just play down to their opponent? And maybe I'm used to Ohio State, kind of like how Oregon is, where we're just going to put up points, and you got to try and match our points. Indiana, we're going to put up points. Ohio State is just kind of, who we playing this week? Oh, all right, we really ain't got to play that hard. So let's just go out there and give a C-plus effort.
That offensive line is a problem, and it shouldn't be considering what they had coming back. But they only had one run of 10 yards last week. It's 64 yards on 31 carries. That's just not good enough. And like Nebraska front was able to do whatever they wanted, and they were all or nothing basically. It was the big plays, Jeremiah Smith. They had a couple plays, Carnell Tate. That was, I think, 137 yards combined from like those three big completions. And then they had 144 the rest of the game. Like they can't be an all or nothing offense. They spent too much money. They got too much talent to do that. But that offensive line's a problem. Their starting left tackle got hurt against Oregon. He's out for the season. The backup came in, completely struggled against Nebraska, and then he got hurt. And they don't know if he's going to be back. They're talking about potentially moving their guard, Donovan Jackson, who's All-American, out to tackle to try to see if that helps anything. But now you're weak at a different position. So, yeah, I think that offensive line's a problem. Penn State's defensive line isn't as good as it's been, so it might not cost them this week. But if you're trying to win the title, which is clearly what they want to do with all the resources they have and all the money they spent, they got to figure something out up front because you're going to have to run against these really good defensive lines and these really good defensive teams. And as we saw against Oregon, they couldn't do it. And, Nebraska last week, they couldn't do it either.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Ohio State, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I can see this team being one of the final four teams in the playoffs. And then there's other weeks where they don't get upset in the first weekend. They may not even get the bye. They may have to play their first game, and it may not even be in Columbus. Because I thought this was going to be like that great equalizer where you're going to see games in Columbus. You're going to see games in Happy Valley. I don't know now. I mean, they already have the loss. I picked them to win the Big Ten. I've said that they would probably go out to Oregon and lose, but then they would beat them in a rematch in the championship game. But now I'm looking at what it's going to end up being in week 13. Let's just say they beat Penn State. Who wins that Indiana-Ohio State game is going to get the opportunity to play Oregon in Indianapolis. So I don't know. I look at the team. They got a ton of firepower. They got NFL players in all the skill positions. But, man, their offensive and defensive line, it's been a long time since you've seen a Bosa-type brother or a Chase Young type of just that instant impact. I'm going to blow this up. You can double team me all you want. You still cannot stop me. So I don't know if it's Ryan Day. I have no idea. But this team for the past few seasons have looked the same where it's almost like, there's an Ohio State that you order online and then you get the Temu version who actually shows up to the stadium. That's what it feels like to me.
No, you're right. And in these big games for Ohio State, like you said, they can't run the ball, and then the defense can't get home. In their, 4 straight losses against top 5 teams, we got 1 takeaway, we got 4 sacks. Like, you're Ohio State, you're getting top 50, top 100 players at every position. As we talked about with the Bosas, with Chase Young, for whatever reason, like those guys aren't coming through there. Like Jack Sawyer, solid player. JTT, solid player, but they haven't been the game breakers. And as we've seen against Penn State in the past, it's like, oh, it's a big fourth down. Joey Bosa's coming around sacking Christian Hackenberg. Oh, it's a big 4th and 2. Like Chase Young's blowing up a play. He's ending the game. Like that's it.
Right.
Like Ohio State doesn't have that, and they haven't had that. They've had to kind of do it by committee and just out talent people. But when you get in these top 5 games, like they got better talent than you or the same. So you can't just rely on talent to do it. You need a special player on the D line, and they don't have that.
So if you had to pick between the 3 games, which of the teams you think could pull off the upset? Penn State, Michigan State, or the University of Michigan?
Let's see. I would say probably Penn State, Michigan State, Michigan in that order. I think Penn State being at home certainly gives them a better chance of winning. I think that line's the smallest too at 3.5.
And if I'm Penn State, I understand why they're upset, and this game screams night game. This game, Wisconsin and Iowa, great. USC, Washington, fine. This is a night game. It's at Penn State. I want to see the whiteout. That's an intimidating environment. And if this game was at night, I would be all in on Penn State because I don't think that Ohio State can handle it. I think this game being played at noon is the advantage of Ohio State because the whiteout doesn't look the same in broad daylight.
No, I agree. And I feel like that's been an issue for them for a couple of years now where they've had Michigan in big games, but it's been the big noon game. So they've had to play it early. Ohio State 2 years ago, the 2022 game where they had a chance to win it. But like you said, the crowd is just different. And I know they can't control that, but I do think that's a big advantage that gets taken away because we've seen that environment at night and it's crazy. And it's just not the same at noon.
No, it is. All right, Harold, you got anything else for me? Any other stats you need to drop for this week?
No, I think my biggest one was that the defending champion at home, because I know that it seems like a lot of points and like, man, like Michigan's getting 2 touchdowns at home and, they're 5-3 and, history says like, take the better team, like take the much better team. And
somehow I don't see Oregon squandering a first drive and getting down to the 2-yard line and coming away with nothing. So,
right.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel to me, I think Dylan Gabriel is the favorite to win the Heisman. I'm looking at what he's doing, and maybe it's because he plays at Oregon, and Oregon, the Ducks are not helping him because, Lanning is kind of powering the game down. It's like when they hit the limiter, when they hit 35 points, they just kind of power it down and say, okay, enough. We're going to save some for the next game instead of putting up them gaudy video game type numbers. But this brother just goes out there and gets it done. And I'm like, man, Dylan Gabriel, we don't talk about him, but if in these final couple games, Oregon really showcases him, I think he could end up pulling off the Heisman.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think, like you said, it's been mostly a quarterback award. They're the number 1 team in the country. He's going to have big showcase games, and he's got the numbers to back it up. He's accounted for at least 3 touchdowns in every game they've played. He's got the big splashy plays. He's got the signature win against Ohio State. And assuming they get to the Big Ten championship game again, they'll probably play another top 10 team in Indy. All eyes will be on that game. If he performs well, like it'd be hard to take it from him. I just think some of the other candidates, they might be better football players in the case of like a Travis Hunter or Ashton Genty, but are you going to give it to a Colorado team that might be 8-4? Are you going to give it to a Boise State team whose best win is a loss at Oregon, even though he played really well in that game? I just feel like voters a lot of times can take the easy way out. And it's like, oh yeah, well, quarterback on the number 1 team who's got the numbers, like, sure, let's just give it to him. So like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was the case.
Yeah, I think that, what's hurting Travis Hunter is his head coach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm not voting. I'm not going to do anything that's going to make Deion Sanders happy. Because if you don't like Deion Sanders, I don't want you to be happy. I want you to be miserable. I want you to complain. I want you to go on TV and say, why isn't my son in the Heisman Trophy talk? I look at Hunter, And I think the thing that was cemented for Hunter is, and I hate to put this extra pressure on the kid, it's not fair. But if all of a sudden he returned a kickoff or returned a punt for a touchdown, along or in the same game got a pick six and got a couple touchdowns, that would be that Heisman type moment for him. So that's what he would need there. That's just
I
my
agree.
opinion.
I agree.
So
And then I think you also have to get to at least 9 wins. Like I'd be really surprised if an eight win team got it. Like
yeah,
you see 9-3 a lot of times, at least more recently with like Tebow, RG3, guys like that, Manziel. But 8 wins, like if you lose 4 times, people don't usually give you Heisman, even if you are the best talent.
no, you're right. All right, Hill. Appreciate it. We'll have a breakdown of next week's games next week. Hey guys, thanks for listening and watching the 5 Star Zone. For Hill Sheldon, I'm Rico Beard. Keep liking and subscribing. We'll be back next week.